machine.
I was a Catholic as a child, raised as a Catholic. When I went to college, like a lot of people, I drifted away from my faith and really started to question my faith and really began to espouse an atheism. Sort of it's depending on how you define atheism, agnosticism. Some people might refer to it as agnosticism in the sense that I was still holding out hope in God, but was had all but sort of given up on that.
Yeah.
And and then there was a gradual change in terms of that I think was partly intellectual, in that I started to see some evidence pointing towards the importance of faith for people's lives. I think that was sort of planting some seeds.
Mm-hmm.
My wife had a conversion experience. She was a Protestant, Presbyterian, converted to Catholicism without, at the time that I was an atheist, much to my frustration, and I wasn't really thrilled about that.
Mm-hmm.
That was, but then she started inviting me to go to mass with her, and I sort of reluctantly started to go at first, wanting to support her, and then gradually that started to have an impact on me, and then all of that sort of culminated in something I've talked about on the journey home, for example, is this experience that I had in a cemetery during a retreat, where I had a mystical experience of the presence of God and very clear, distinct messages from God about where I was going with my life. And that was really powerfully transformative. It was a direct, unmediated kind of experience that I couldn't deny. And then ever since then, I've been very passionately engaged with the faith.
You have an experience of the transcendent. So just tell me a little bit about this experience that you had at this retreat as this kind of a nexus point in your life.
Yeah. Well, it was what led up to it was, as I said, I was going to mass with my wife, and at that point, I was living in Buffalo, New York. I was working in a place called Damon College, and I was there for 4 years before I came to Pittsburgh. And we had been going to a church that was very close to our apartment, and we didn't really feel a real hospitality at that church, especially for children. We had a very young infant. Well, he was maybe a toddler at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like we would sit down in the church, and everybody would people would move away. We didn't feel welcome. We felt like we were a nuisance. So we decided we maybe should find a mass that was more family friendly. And so my wife asked around to some folks in her network, and they recommended this church, St. Stephen's is the name of the church, which is on an island just north of the city of Buffalo called Grand Island. So we started going there, and it took us like a half hour to get there, but we drove there, and it was a very family friendly mass. It was packed. I mean, there was tons of people there, and then we would show up, and the usher, one particular usher, but everybody there, all of the ushers were immensely hospitable. And I felt, there was a sense of, like, it wasn't pretense. Like, they were really genuinely happy to see you and welcoming you there. And that was really...
That's always a good experience, yeah.
That was a very good experience, yeah. And then this usher that would stand, he would usually stand behind where we sat in the church. We would kind of sit in the back of the church, and he would always, make a point to make some gesture to my son Dean. He would like give him a nickel, or like say something to him, or crack it, or say a joke to him. And so I felt like he really appreciated that, we had this child with us, and he really made him feel good about coming to mass too. And we felt good about that as well. So one day that guy, after mass, I was walking out, and he approached me and said, "Hey, we're having this retreat. Would you like to come?" And my motivation, my first instinct was, "Ooh, a retreat? No, I don't want to do that." But I like this guy. I wanted to be friends with him, because I just saw something in him, that I was like, I'd like to be friends with this person. He seems like a virtuous, good person, and someone who I'd like to have in my life as a friend. So, so I went to the retreat, And it was one of these retreats where you would go once a week, and we would have dinner, and then we would usually watch a video and then have a discussion
Mm-hmm.
based on the video. But at the very end, it was a Saturday. We had a whole day concluding event, and part of that included 3 hours of silence where we were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to pray, and then you had the option of going to confession. They weren't going to
Mm-hmm.
coerce you, but if you wanted to during that
Mm-hmm.
time, you could go to confession. So again, when they told me that, I was like, no way, I'm not going to confession. It was like, forget that. I'll pray in
Uh-huh.
silence. So I did that, and I took, like, they handed us some things, like some prayers, a couple sheets of
Mm-hmm.
paper with some prayers on it, and I got through those in, like, a couple minutes probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? So I really did sit there in silence, really, in a contemplative attitude, in
Mm-hmm.
the cemetery in the back of the church. And I honestly thought this is going to be extraordinarily boring. Uh, I was like, how am I going to tolerate 3 hours of this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the opposite. It was anything but boring. I really felt the presence of God breaking through and really communicating to me very distinctly messages, communicating to me
Mm-hmm.
things that God wanted me to hear. And one of the reasons I knew it was God was because, and not just sort of me talking to myself, is that
Mm-hmm.
God was saying things to me that were surprising me, like that I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say to myself. Like he was saying, "You're going to go back to Pittsburgh." That was when I was in Buffalo. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm tenure track. There's no jobs in Pittsburgh. My
Mm-hmm.
wife is never going to do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I'm arguing with God, saying, no way, that's not going to happen. You don't do that to yourself. You know what I mean? You don't argue with
Mm-hmm.
yourself like that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was a real sense of a transcendent voice, and that this was God. And also the fact that I wasn't bored at all. This 3 hours went by, and it went by like so fast. I didn't have a sense of time passing because I was so absorbed, really a feeling of peace too that came over me that I don't think I'd ever quite experienced before. A feeling of you know just this kind of energy, that came with that presence. A vibrant energy in the atmosphere, that was kept me enraptured. And yeah, so the other thing was go back and study joy. You need to get back to that research on joy. I had drifted away from it. I'd kind of gotten a bit
Mm-hmm.
jaded about it because I didn't know how to make sense of this transcendent stuff, probably.
Yeah.
And God was like, you need to go back and do research on that. And the other thing is, God said you should volunteer for hospice. Those were really three clear
Mm-hmm.
messages that I got.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I will do that.
Thank you for watching this Nerding Out short. Click here to watch the full episode. Click the subscribe button and the bell notification to know when we put up new videos. To support the channel, head over to Nerdy Catholic Tees and purchase some nerdy merch of your very own.
System shut down.